Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, Mr. Fisher is here. He's got a really exciting announcement for a program we're about to relaunch again in January. Fisher, take it away.
Yes, well, if any of you listening want me to be your chief marketing officer, we are doing Gym Growth Blast-Off. This will be the third iteration. Very excited to say every time we do it, I think it gets better because I keep integrating feedback and moving around the pieces. And I would say that if anyone is interested in getting more leads and more clients, the promise is I'm going to teach you how to add 3 to 5K of monthly recurring revenue, guaranteed, or I'll keep working with you for free. And the thing that I want to really emphasize is, listen, I think this program is amazing. I think it's going to keep getting better and better and better. But if for some perverse reason you are a Mark fan, this probably going to be your last chance where I'm personally doing the coaching and personally going into your Google document where we're tracking your results. And I'm personally auditing your website and sending you a video. And I'm personally reviewing your Instagram to give you feedback. So if you want me to personally teach you these things, not just through videos and leverage content, but for like one-on-one time where you and I are engaging and sending messages back and forth and I'm helping you refine everything. This is definitely the time to go ahead and take action. So I'd love to see you. We kick off on January 13th. January 13th will be the kickoff.
Awesome. There's a link in the show notes to your friends, so go click that and let us know if you're interested. We'll send you all the information. Like Mark said, this is the third time we're doing it. We've gotten incredible feedback already. And as Fisher also said, it's maybe our last time that Fisher's going to be as hands-on. So go claim your spot now. Which brings us to today's topic. So we're recording this podcast here kind of like early mid-December. We're already kind of getting nostalgic for 2024, thinking back to all the things we've learned in the year. So we want to take a moment in this episode today and really just share what are some standout lessons learned from Mark and I from 2024. This won't be, all of our many, many lessons learned. We thought we'd circle back to the ones that really stand out that might be useful to all of you. Because if we're learning it, it might also be a useful lesson for you. So Fisher, why don't you kick us off? When looking back at the year, what's something that stands out as an important lesson learned?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, this year was so atypical. This is a hard year for me. This is a hard year. I really sort of learned the lessons, I think, of my own limits. I mean, I think for me, one lesson, which there's not necessarily a takeaway from other people, is for someone that knows that I have certain, healthy and at times very unhealthy abilities to overfunction and just put myself into a mode where I can just crush through obscene amounts of work. Even I have my limits, and trying to do too many things just became deeply unfun for me. And I think I was still doing pretty good at a lot of those, but the real cost, I'll say for me, and again, I'm not trying to prescribe to anybody, was it made me unhappy. There was just too much toggling. It's interesting. I'm sure we'll do a proper debrief on MFF and the thinking behind that. And there's a lot to be said about that. But, one thing I'll say for me that was the lesson is, at this point in my life, I'm just so interested in doing less but better. And I think we've talked about that for a long time, but it really wasn't until I experienced the full opposite. Again, it's not that I think I was doing bad work necessarily, but even if the amount of time that running 3 businesses asked of me could fit in the box, and there were many weeks where the time did fit in the box, the mental space for me did not work. There was just too much toggling. Anytime I'm reading a business book or a podcast, I'm in my head, I'm well, which business am I thinking about? And which team am I thinking about? So, I think if there's a takeaway maybe for gym owners, we talk about this a lot, but I think the key thing is, Dan John 101, baby, just keep the main thing, the main thing, keep the main thing, the main thing, decide what you want, willing to kill your darlings and, not chase the shiny objects, which just gets harder because the more far along you get in your career, Hormozi calls it the woman in the red dress, right? The more you just have all these opportunities, just keep getting cooler and cooler and cooler. And yes, I've learned some lessons about what I can and can't do, and excited about the future. But wow, boy, that was not fun in certain moments.
It's tough. People underestimate how the kind of anxiety and work that comes with being spread so thin, or with like juggling so many different kinds of things, or having to
Yeah.
switch your thinking from one task or business or person or group to the next. So much energy gets kind of lost in that transition. It's exhausting. So, I think it's a great lesson for all of our listeners that if you find yourself in those moments where you are juggling multiple things and don't feel like you're doing any of it well, it's time to pause and really trying to figure out, what do I get off my plate? What do I stop doing or delegate, and I think we all know that intuitively, but rarely take the moment to do it. So yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one. Yeah, I'll share one. And this is maybe a relearn or a reminder, as is maybe all of these, but I think, well, something that really stood out to me this year was a big reminder to take big swings. Right. I think, and you and I have I think a healthy risk tolerance, but I don't think we're huge risk takers. And I know for myself, I'm really not. I really like slow, steady, incremental growth. And this year, just watching a lot of our Unicorn Society members take big fucking
Yeah.
swings was just really inspiring,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People like just doubling down on growing their team and opening other locations and buying
Yeah.
buildings and opening other buildings on the other businesses on the side. Even some of our coaches, like Wendy is one of our coaches on our team. She has a whole freaking supplements company she's been growing.
Yeah.
Certainly Unicorn City members like, Ben Fogel, who has been on the podcast before, is like a landlord, and it was like 8 or 9 properties. Plus he bought the building his gym is in. Right. I was just on the phone today with Unicorn City Kevin Bennett, who literally just bought a building
Yeah.
and is maybe buying
Yeah.
another one. I just found out.
Yes.
Right. Sorry, spoiler alert. Just like big fucking swings. And it's just a great reminder that we're capable of doing great things. We're capable of taking risk. And when we do, the reward can be tremendous. The loss can also be tremendous, right?
Yeah.
But we often overweigh the risk and don't often think enough about the potential reward. And it's my reminder to do that. I think the person who also give a shout out to is fellow Unicorn Society coach, Chris Travis. One of the things that he does in his business, and I'll steal these from him, and I think is great for all of you to steal to kind of make this tactical, is every year when you're planning your kind of annual goals, pick one big swing for the year. Every year, pick one thing that you might not do, right? That may not work out, right? That might represent a big risk. And, think about the risk, but pick one thing that if you were going to take a big swing in that year, what would it be? And it allows you and your team, not allows you, encourages you and your team to really think outside the box, to let go of your limiting beliefs, to challenge yourself in learning new things. And I think, it can be scary, but can be so, so beneficial. And especially after you've built a business, you get even more protective.
Yeah.
Right. And so, because there's more to lose. Right. And so I think it's just a really good reminder to me, and hopefully all of you listening, don't forget to swing big. You're capable of big things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what else is on your list, sir?
I think like another thing that feels very salient right now is the importance of when you're doing a big project, right? Or perhaps a big swing. When you're doing a big unwieldy project, you just have to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and again, we keep alluding to, we need to plan like a 60-minute, like what the whole like MFF selling conversation, but
I'm sure we'll circle back and have many episodes.
Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, that could happen like relatively quickly, where, just like there's maybe some lesson too about some kind of like karma in life, right? Where it's just like, it's just like the moment we're like, maybe we've gone off board, and then, Coach Fury, who sold it, was a longtime trainer and a successful gym owner client in Brooklyn. He was thinking about his thing. And so there's maybe somebody said about like another takeaway is like, be nice to people, because long-term cool things can happen. You can do some cool stuff together. But, that sort of logistical stuff for me, my brain is just not wired at it. And it was very difficult for me, even though I've been in the game long enough, I can step out of it and not be, hysterical about how just like not good it feels. But, there were, for me, probably like 2 months where it just felt like it was like mud. It felt total mud. It was like we weren't sure exactly what we're going to do. We had to make all these decisions. There were all these like pending feelings that, we thought we'd have to navigate, though I'll share in a moment. I think for the most part, people responded, and I mean, this is a compliment, with a shrug. but
Yeah.
just allowing yourself to just do the next thing. And I don't want to justify any sort of like wishful thinking, Pollyanna-esque, it's all going to turn out fine. Like, you got to do the work, and we knew we would get there. But man, it both didn't feel good at all in various moments because it was such a big project. And it's also like not my zone of genius, but just trusting that like you just slog and you do the thing. And it's not, for me, I have a real challenge because a lot of what I do, frankly, a lot of my things I can get done in a day or two by myself. Like, a lot of what I do is actually very compartmentalized, and I can sort of do it on my own. And this sort of like big project, legally kind of, yeah, you can't do that on your own. You can't do that fast. And there's just a lot of unfun work to be done. But I think if you just like keep focused on the next thing, on the other end, for me, because it's so hard for me, it's so satisfying to be on the other end of it. In Canada, we're still not totally there. I still have to finalize the final things. But now it's starting to feel like, whoa, holy crap, I can't believe we pull it off. Whoa, how do we do that again? And I think like most of the hard things that we've done across the businesses, usually that's kind of the way it felt. An extended period of like, what am I doing?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I also am realizing I should probably pause just for a second here for like the, 5 to 10% of you who haven't heard this news. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast yet. Have we? I should remember that, but I don't. So for those of you who hadn't heard the news.
Yes.
Yeah, that Mark and I decided not that long ago that we were selling Mark Fisher Fitness, and we did. And as of January 1st, Mark Fisher Fitness will have a new owner. His name is Coach Fury, or Steve Holliner. He's been on the podcast. He's a Unicorn Study member, former MFF employee, has his own gym in Brooklyn. I'm sure he'll be on the podcast again talking about this. But that's what Mark was talking about. And whether your big project is selling your gym or anything else, I think the big takeaway here is you got to take one step at a time. It's sometimes so overwhelming. It can feel so dizzying and disorienting when you're in it. And you have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's like, it's a classic analogy, right? You look up and stare at the top of the mountain and be like, I will never get there. How the hell will I ever get there? When really you have to start just by packing your bag. Right, you got to pack your bag before you worry about summiting the mountain, right? And it's just it's easier said than done, but I think that's the lesson in there. And for all of you wanting to hear more about that transaction of MFF, we'll be having, I'm sure, many podcasts about it. So stay tuned. Yeah, I'll share one more. I think we have time for each to do one more, maybe, which is I'll share a personal one. A personal one is. And again, this is maybe like a relearn, but certainly this year, I've relearned again and again, and this year was a big one, that what I want is always changing, and that's okay.
You stole mine.
Like,
you stole my third one.
Oh, did I? Yeah. Great. Well, listen, I think, it's a good year for that for us, right? I mean, ultimately, all too often in my life, and I'm sure this resonates with many of you listening, I've had a goal or a vision of what I wanted or who I wanted to be or the work I want to do, the relationships I want to have. And I felt tied to that, right? Like if I changed my mind about any of those things, somehow I was out of integrity with myself, or I was certainly in political spheres, right? We call this person like a flip-flopper, right? Like there's a lot of negative connotation to people changing their minds about things, about what they want or what they think or how they feel. And I've just come to realize that like it's actually the most intellectually honest, genuine thing you can do is be honest about the fact that the world's evolving, our lives are evolving, we're evolving as people. And if we're not honest about our changing perspectives, or if we dig our heels in and never change our perspective, that's actually not something to be proud of.
Like Mike Boyle,
I know this.
Be like Mike Boyle.
Change your mind, right? And I think, especially when it comes to career stuff, right? Like there's something about the identities we form with our work for many of us, especially as entrepreneurs who build something, right? Or business owners who build something, right? That we become tied to that identity. And certainly we'll be having, I'm sure, more of this journey as MFF kind of is handed off and we pass the torch. But even before the MFF sale this year, there's lots of moments where I had to reckon with myself that like, oh, that thing that I found value doing, I'm finding less value doing. It's actually not as fun for me, not as engaging for me, and not feeling bad for the fact that what I want is changing. And I think it's part of why we're self-employed and own our own businesses is so we have the freedom to explore the things that interest us. So I'm holding myself back from that. I'm not fully exploring the reason I created this life for myself in the first place. Right. And so I know that resonates with you. So what would you add to that?
Yeah, so it's so interesting, right? Because I think the thing that is very unusual now at this point, I'll be 45 in January, so I've been at this a minute, is now because and I know you have too, have had enough iterations of my professional identity, which, for me, it's a big part of my life that doesn't have a trivial impact on my sense of who I am as a person, who I am and how I move in the world. The thing that's interesting is from this vantage point now, I can look at what I'm currently doing. And I feel like I'm really setting myself up to do the exact thing I love and I'm great at. I'll come back to that in a second. But I also have a little bit of humility of assuming like, for a minute. Yeah, this is what I like for a minute. I love this now.
Yep.
I can't make any grand claims in 10 years. This is exactly what I'm going to be on firing to do it.
Yep.
I have a general sense I want to keep doing business stuff. I think that's probably true. I think it'll probably be fitnessy stuff. But I'm just, trying to give myself more grace and permission, just continue to sort of follow the thread and trust it always leads me when I follow the thing that I want to do and where my heart is leading me. It's like so cliche, but like it is true. Like the dots make sense looking backwards. And sometimes it takes me to
Yep.
very unexpected places. My mid-20s, I didn't think I was going to open up a gym, that's for sure. And I think
Yeah.
the related to this, one of the things that I know is a barrier for me, which was a constant relearn, but this was like a big learn, is I joked before that the news of MFFs being sold was met largely positively with a shrug, right? I don't mean to say that like nobody cared. I think people are like, "Oh, that's really interesting, huh? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool for you guys. That's really cool.
Yep.
Cool, oh, great for you guys.
Yep.
Congrats." And like that was the extent of it. Whereas I think, having this incredible and useful tension between there were moments before this all went live where I was like besides myself and frankly just crippled with like anxiety and just fear, like are people gonna think I'm letting them down, are people gonna be mad at me, which now is like insane. Like who's gonna get mad at me, admittedly, like
Yeah.
real talk, like on your team, that's maybe a little bit more real. And I
Sure.
definitely had a lot of
Sure.
concerns, and ultimately I think we stuck the landing beautifully. But for them, like there are some changes coming, and it would be only appropriate to, maybe feel like a little bit unsettled. And I think overall, I'm very proud of the way we rolled this out and the way we communicated, and very proud of the way the team is handling it because it's change, and change is a stressor. My concerns about clients being mad, it was really, really weird. Like, what were they going to be mad at me about? But for some reason, I was like, oh, people are going to probably send me a mean email about
Yeah.
this, because this was obviously
Yep.
tensioned. The big thing for this year, which I don't think we talked about on the podcast, but readers of the emails know, is that my father passed away this year, right? And that
Yep.
was so challenging, of course, having lost my father not that much longer after losing my mother and selling our childhood home this summer and being like, well, I don't have a home anymore. This version of me, which we're doing our podcast on Mark's childhood, which you knew, a very specific version of me, which most of the world will never know.
Yeah.
That was largely contextual because of this, kind of atypical, kind of challenging upbringing. That part of me was going away, right? And I think that is
Yep.
such a powerful forcing function to get honest about, okay, what do you want? And yes, if you're not aligned to doing this anymore and this doesn't feel good to you, just because, to your point, that felt good to you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you just have to
Mm-hmm.
let the new you be born. And in some cases, be willing to
Yep.
drink a cup of poison if you need to get through it. Again, here on the other side of it, knock on wood, I guess we still have some, miles to go, but it's like, okay, it wasn't ultimately even that bad. But I think that
Sure.
this sort of ability to give yourself permission to be who you want to be and allow your dreams to change and grow and evolve, I think it's like super important. And, I think if you're
Yeah.
someone like me that cares a lot about keeping commitments and what other people might think, and cares deeply about my impact on other people, that is valuable. But you just don't want to over index on that because you can do it
Mm-hmm.
in ways that aren't helpful. I remember like as long as like 7-8 years ago, I remember we occasionally hired an outside executive coach to do some work with us. And something like always
Yep.
sat with me as we were doing a visioning exercise. And I remember you saying something like, it was something extent of, your vision for me was that one day I would let go of what the team thought about me and just be the me that I want to be. And it took me years. I got there now. But yeah, it was good advice. And yeah, I appreciate your counsel. And yeah, let's all keep growing into
Yeah.
who we want to be.
We're all growing in who we want to be. It's a process. I also want to just pause and make room in this conversation also for people who find the one thing you love and do it your whole fucking life. Right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
true that,
also
true that.
cool and not us.
Yeah,
like that like I wish, right?
yeah,
You discover in you're in high school or
yeah,
college the thing that you
yeah,
love and it's all
yeah,
you do and you're stoked every day to do it. God bless you. Like good for you. Like that's amazing. And for
yeah,
many people, I think it's actually probably more common these days when I look at the research on people changing jobs and careers. People are more
yeah,
mobile in their lives.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think, just making room for the fact that what we want changes and that's okay. In fact, it's
Yeah,
good. Yeah. All right. Well,
indeed.
let's pull it there. We can keep talking all about this year. And for those of you who want more information again about MFF and us selling it, don't worry. That stuff's coming. I know today was a little bit of a teaser in that it represented some of our
Yeah.
lessons for the year, but don't worry. More is coming. All right, Fisher, one last reminder. If people want to do Gym Growth Blast Off with you, where do they go? What do they do?
Yes, you can. If you're listening to this, the easiest thing to do is just, if you're not already following us on Instagram, what's wrong with you? Follow us on Instagram, send us a DM, and we can get you information there. If you're in a place where it's convenient, you should be able to click the link in the show notes to go to Instagram, send us a DM. We'll be happy to get you all the details. Just to be clear, this is for gym owners with at least 30 clients. We do require a minimum because I want to understand, A, do we have proof of concept, and B, some of these tricks will work best if we have some base of clients. But yeah, DM us on Instagram and kick off January 13th. More leads, more clients. Let's work together. Hire me as your fractional chief marketing officer.
I love it. Awesome. Go do that right now, my friends. You won't regret it. And thanks for a great conversation, Fisher. Happy holidays, y'all. See you on the next one.